Thank you. Good morning. So that was just to prove that we do have a live audience here for the people who are joining us online. Welcome to day 2 of FinTech LIVE London 2023. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that we don't have 2 panelists sitting here today to discuss women in FinTech, but we have 3. More on that later. But you'll also notice there is an empty chair. So if anyone has been longing for the spotlight or to talk about your experiences of women in FinTech, now's your chance. So if you want to put your hand up, don't be shy. Anyone can come and join us. There's no trick questions here. It's just sharing your own experiences and your own thoughts. So if anyone wants to join us, put your hand up in the next 30 seconds. Not many hands going up there. Okay, Tracy, you're on. Okay, we're going to make a start. Thank you for joining us here in the room and also online, as I said. This is slightly later than build. That's because we're going to roll straight from this session into the rest of the day 2 content. So joining me from my left are Jenny Wood. She's Director of Strategy, Transformation and Architecture at Digital X at the NatWest Group. Then we have Kamila McWilliam, VP of Corporate Development at GoCardless. And joining us at short notice, delighted to have Odelia Torteman, Global Digital Finance Specialist at IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group. So please welcome your panel. Thank you. Still no takers for the extra chair. Last chance. Okay, your chance has gone. Okay, so now we're going to try and turn this into a bit of a conversation rather than a Q&A, and we talked about this earlier as well. So I'm going to start with you, Jenny. Can you share your own personal journey and experiences as a woman in FinTech, and obviously tell us more about your role as well?
Yeah, so I run strategy, transformation, architecture for Digital X at NatWest. And so NatWest, Digital X looks after fraud, financial crime, technology, data, security, and some of our operations teams. So I help work out where we're going to go for technology and how we're going to construct the building blocks that we create through the organization. I started my career in tech well over 30 years ago when some insightful careers advisor said, you don't know what you want to do, there's these new degrees in technology, they're trying to get more women into tech. So why don't you go and do one of these degrees in technology? And so when I did that degree over 30 years ago, it was 50-50 that they were trying to get into the degree. And over 30 years ago, only 18% of women are in technical roles. So, you know, it hasn't moved on much from when I started my career in tech. I've done all sorts of things, and my career in tech's let me work in telcos, large and small, finance institutions. You know, I've done technical roles in coding, and I've actually done customer service roles. So wide variety of background, but passionate about technology and the chance to solve problems. And that's why I ended up in tech.
And Kamila, your experience?
So I look after M&A on behalf of GoCardless. GoCardless are an account-to-account payments business. So we are an 11-year-old company and specialize in recurring payments, but also open banking payments, and other schemes. Mostly, I just look for acquisition opportunities and investments on behalf of the group. And I guess I'm a M&A person first and a FinTech person second, because I started my career in investment banking, in technology. And the first deal that I worked on, the big transaction, was in payments. So within very few years, quickly, I moved into being a payments banker. And that's really my career. I mean, I took a little bit of a hard shoulder when I wanted to have a family, and maybe we'll talk about that. It's very hard to do that in M&A. And I ran Ping It, which was an app at Barclays. So I was at Barclays for 15 years, and then I read a lot of Sheryl Sandberg type literature and thought I could easily retire at Barclays. I mean, I'm unsackable, basically, as the only woman in the room. I still enjoy the job, but I wanted to move into another FinTech role, keep doing deals, but maybe on a smaller scale, build something more meaningful. And now I'm on my second FinTech. So it's been a 16-year career. but I still enjoy most of it. And I think we'll talk more about how much it's changed. I mean, not only in the Venn diagram of M&A, but also FinTech, there's not a lot of overlap in terms of representation. So, but I am seeing signs of improvement, perhaps even this panel is an evidence of that.
Odelia.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to everyone. Pleasure being here, and thank you for welcoming me. So I've spent the last 12 years focusing on the world of FinTech, digital finance, and enterprise innovation. For the last 3 years, as mentioned, I've been working with IFC, which is the private sector investment arm of the World Bank Group. Beforehand, I spent 5 years with Deloitte, leading the FinTech and the blockchain arm under the technology consulting practice. And beforehand, I was working at the EU Directorate, focusing on integration of large-scale R&D and technology projects across the EU and the associated countries. I love FinTech. I think FinTech has a very unique aspect into it because it really embodies, from one side, the aspect of global international development, changing technological aspects, the individual that sits in the middle, and how can we support them, and overall, how we can truly make an impact while consolidating all of that together. So for me, FinTech has been a passion. I think it's a field that enables you to bring all kinds of multidisciplinary aspects into it, whether it's more technology, whether it's finance, whether it's even psychology, whether if it's, of course, macroeconomics and global aspects. So I'm a big fan about that. And to your question around where it stays, I think that what we're seeing in recent years, right, regarding everything around digital finance and the tokenization and a lot of aspects from blockchain really shift this whole thing into a new level, which I find even more fascinating. So happy to continue this later on.
Okay, great. So we're here to talk about the unique challenges, I suppose, that women face within FinTech and how, well, what your experiences of those challenges are and how you've actually overcome them. Jenny, why don't you start us off there?
So I mentioned the stat, 18% of women in technical roles, and when you get into FinTech, that's even less. And when you do get women in the room, the assumption is often that they're not the technologist, they're the project manager, they're the business analyst, they're the one who can communicate. And so, women in technology always face a challenge around the fact that they're not recognised for what they do, and they don't see role models who can actually help them understand what the future might look like. I've been looking for female architects to try and increase the diversity in my architecture team, and they're even scarcer than female engineers. One of the things about being technical is that people have an expectation, and so I often get a chance to go and talk to young women about why they won't take a career in technology, and everyone thinks technology is like being a geek. It's being someone who sits in a room who hacks or who codes things and never gets out and speaks to people. And so women have a real hurdle to jump even in societal expectation in their own space around doing that, around entering into careers in technology. Personally, I've loved my career in technology, and the hurdles of representation and the hurdles of having to sometimes show my technical credibility will and truly get offset by the challenges and the things that you can create.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I used to have this one joke, right, which was like when there was a breakout session after a board meeting or something, like all the men would funnel into the loos, and I would say, "There's no queue in mine." And this is still very much true. But I would say I relate to everything that Jenny says, but I sort of thrive on this underestimation. And it's like a power within me to say that if I go into a meeting and then somebody doesn't think that you're technical or you're not capable and you sort of get to prove them wrong, that's awesome, right? Because you can watch that education over the period of time, and I think that's super fulfilling. I do relate to mentorship, right? I always look for the other kindred spirit. I've been lucky to have some female mentors, some super amazing male mentors who have really nurtured talent. Not mine, but other people's. and that's those two sort of limbs, not to bright side it, but make it worth it. Yeah, that's what I have to say on it.
I agree. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, because digital finance is actually, I always look at it like the event circles, right? You have consulting, you have technology, you have finance, you have investments. And I think taking those 4 industries separately, they're pretty much predominated by men, right? So in most cases, in most of the rooms, I can unfortunately say, in most cases, I'm the only woman, right? Specifically, I have to say in crypto and in blockchain. I think over there, we have a far more severe situation. And sometimes, I'm sitting in conferences, even in the crowd, and there are like 50 guys and 3 girls. And normally, we sit in the back, like looking at each other. So I think that there's still a long way to go. I think that women should stand much more for one another. And I think that's another issue, right? Because it's such a predominated industries, all 3 of them, I think women should do more. And throughout my career, I've always tried to put it aside, not to look at it as, I'm a woman, and from a feminist perspective, not at all. I always look at it as being a practitioner. However, certain situations in life throughout my career indeed left me speechless. And I was thinking about this panel that what came to mind was one of the things that happened last year. I was doing a digital transformation strategy for one of the largest banks in Central Asia. And I was leading this project, and as we got to the stage of introducing and presenting our strategy to the board, one of my colleagues got his flights changed, so he wasn't able to join. And one of the ladies from our team that sits there on-prem in the region called me and says, listen, Odelia, we have to bring another man to join you for the presentation. And I'm like, no, it's perfectly fine. I've pursued this whole project. I got this. She's like, no, there's got to be another man with you introducing it to the board. And I'm like, I'm not sure I follow. I need a man to introduce it for me. She's like, yes, Odelia, this is a post-Soviet Union country, this is the way they work. And I was speechless. I'm like, and her name was Maria. I'm like, Maria, please please repeat that I've just understood. We need a man to literally vocalize and verbalize my effort in the last 6 months. And she said yes. So we brought someone from the team who literally sat and introduced the findings. And for me, this was a real deal breaker. First of all, I was insulted, honestly, and furious because this is 2023. And if our internal organizations will not stand up, even if this is the culture within different regions, which I understand and I respect, and I think we all have to respect different cultures of where we work, specifically working globally. But if our own organizations will not have our backs and will not strive to make a difference, then that difference will never occur.
So how did you handle that situation?
Honestly, I can't say I had a brilliant strategy. I just follow suit. And he indeed gave most of the talk, and I smiled and waved like the penguins in Madagascar, and that's it, My name was in the report, but it's irrelevant. And unfortunately, this is the world. And I think that many women specifically, I think more on the early stage of your career, and I'm sure many of the women here and potentially our viewers have encountered that, right? Young women, you face all kinds of these situations throughout your career, and you always find yourself in an intersection. Should I raise my voice and start a fuss, or should I just, take it easy and just, let it slide because I have a long journey to go and I'm still starting and it's not a time to make a muss or a fuss around some things. And fast forward, a few years goes by, and I think that many women, unfortunately, have become, addicted to this pattern.
Jenny, I see you nodding away there.
Yeah, I was just reflecting. I love it when new people come in and go, why did that happen? And after so long in technology and having seen technology grow, because it has got better, there are so many things that you're immune to that you just know to work around, and you know when to actually push the barrow, when to just go along because that's the world. And so what's always important for me is that even if you don't change the circumstance at the time, you let someone know that the circumstance happened so that you can consider what you might do next time. So even a mentor or someone else. And we talk about sort of giving people who don't feel included the tools to actually then go and have a conversation about helping to make sure next time the person's even aware of that. It'd be really interesting to understand if the people, rather than the people executing, whether, the voice goes back to say, next time, could we just think about doing it differently? Next time, could we context it differently? And for me, that's really important. And that helps younger women who don't necessarily have a voice, and less senior women, and that's where advocacy, you were talking about advocacy, comes in as well, really makes a big difference. And so having been in similar circumstances, you just sometimes let it slide. But what I learnt later in my life is that the answer is to make sure that doesn't happen to someone else.
So I assume that's on a individual organisation level you're talking about there. Yeah. I mean, what can the industry do to better support and empower women to thrive in fintech roles?
Well, this helps, right? I think being vociferous about it. I think that, some of the ESG and the quotas that the wage gap and all of these government-supported programs improve and make a core KPI of companies in our industry. So visibility and actually some benchmarking is super important. I think institutionally we can have, have representation in the room and make sure that it's there. So looking at the boards in fintech, I mean, my board doesn't have a single woman on it. And so that could be something. It's very hard to change boards, particularly when, we're a Series G investment, and it doesn't happen overnight. But that sort of is on an individual customer level. Look, I don't have the answer, right? Like, I guess reflecting on what you said, like, do you be quiet or do you stand up? I think I have a terminable problem, which is that I always, serve and volley. And so I'm working on that. And I think for the first maybe 5 years of my career, I was super quiet. I would just take it. And now I don't take it because I hope that will make it easier for the next person. Like, at the end of the day, that's what I'm just trying to make a better copacetic environment for all of us to exist in. So that would help. I think it's a multi-dimensional problem, and I don't have the silver bullet.
Yeah. I also think it's a delicate balance. I mean, if all of us would have been sitting quietly, we probably wouldn't be here talking today and arrived to where we are in life, right? So I think it has been managed wisely, and it needs to be managed wisely. I think that to your question, I think it can be divided into two aspects. First is the personal change, right? I mean, I honestly think women need to flip the table more. And we don't, because, I mean, we're strong, we're powerful, we stand on our own, but in a different way. And I think that sometimes, potentially, a table needs to be flipped, right? Even for the sake of a statement, that's one. Second, I think currently there are more and more organizations and more initiatives that are supporting that. I'm part of a program called the Fem Forward, which supports all kinds of women in tech from MENA and from the US, and basically connecting women that are just starting their careers with other women in technology and serving as their mentor. But this is really, what I love about this program is that it's super hands-on. You have these young ladies that comes with super everyday question, like, how do you manage those super delicate situations? Do I raise my voice? Do I stay quiet? How do I pursue to get a promotion, to get a raise? All the cliches that we're always saying that women will not apply for a job if they don't believe that they're 100% qualified. That's the truth. And I think that that's a hinder, and I think that that's something that is a barrier in our progress. So I think from one hand, on the individual level, second, everything around different initiative, and thirdly, I think that also maybe the organizations themselves, should focus on putting more and more women on the spotlight, even for the sake of visibility, for the sake of, making our voices sound.
Yeah, you can't be what you can't see is the cliche that everyone has. And so having role models, seeing people who are successful, being technical in fintech, CEOs of companies, those sorts of things are fundamentally important. I said when I introduced myself, we've been working on this for a long time. And it is a systemic shift in the way that not only people see the role of females and females see occupations that are available to them, but also in societal understanding of technology. I get the privilege of on International Women's Day, we invite local schools in for a series of tasters for tech. And often, being older, I get to talk to the parents. And often the parents say to me, well, what sort of career? The parents don't know the careers in technology. So they don't know that, their daughter should actually go on and do GCSE, or if you're in Scotland like me, higher computing or maths, because they don't know what the career is. And they can't help guide someone who's got an interest into that space. And so we do a lot of work trying to bring mid-level people in and career switches as well. So a lot of work in schools, a lot of work with code clubs, a lot of work changing, accessibility and knowledge for people as they come through, but we'll never fix. That's a slow fix. So we do a partnership with a group called Code First Girls, very similar to the conversation you're having, which is about midlife career switches for women. And some of the quotes we get from that are from women who never imagined when they went to school that they'd been working in technology. And sometimes they tell us that they're now not just a role model for themselves, but they're a role model for community that they're a part of, because no one in their community works in technology. They've not gone to university with people who work in technology. They've not been exposed to it. And so there are programs like that which can help systemically do that. And through that, we with Code First Girls have taught 5,000 women to code who would never have otherwise done that. And then to your point, mid-career is a real problem for women in tech. You find junior women, we're growing the numbers of junior women, but then when you start getting to your tech experts, your senior tech people, it doesn't work for them to come back sometimes to project-based work or to engineering work. And so we're trying to work out how we help that level of your career take the next step up, advocate for their job, for their move from being an engineer to being a distinguished or principal engineer, depending on what you're using, or architect. And so there's work in that space that we think we can also do that help change the balance of women in technology.
Well, along those lines, if that's a hurdle or a barrier even, what advice would you have to maybe people in this room or watching this who are, women aspiring to build themselves a career in fintech? What advice would you give them? How can we get over that hurdle?
For me, be curious, be confident, trust in your own capabilities. I like the more flipping the table type conversation. Be confident that you're who you are and not let people around you tell you. And that's really hard to say because as you go through career, feedback matters. But be confident in who you are and your capabilities. Role models, mentors, but also reach out. That there are lots of women who pay it forward, who are willing to sit down and have conversations around career situations. I love the program. I'm going to go and look it up to see, to see how you can help people better understand. But it is about being curious, and it's about being proud. When someone asks you where you work, what do you say? Do you say, I work in technology? Or do you say, hey, I build things for people? So all of those things make a fundamental difference in the way that we see work in society.
I think it's interesting because if you take a step back, right, like fintech and disruption and new technologies is democratizing it. And also if you take new streams like crypto a few years ago, it's a new area, and so there isn't this provenance of knowledge. Like it isn't, like an asset heavy a business that has been around for years, and so, the 60-year-old person is most qualified to give an opinion because of the history there. And so qualitating your opinion, like your opinion is as good as any because it is a new technology, because strategy isn't fully formed yet, and because it is fundamentally disruptive. And I think that as a vote of confidence, right? If you take that mindset to say, like nobody here is an expert, we're all just pontificating on what the future holds, then that gives you a natural entry that perhaps would make you more comfortable rather than coming from a place of like, I don't know anything about asset-backed securities, for example.
It's a good example, but nobody knows anything, I think, about asset-backed securities, not even us. No, but to your question, I think, first of all, my tip or recommendation for people at the beginning of their careers, regardless of men or women, is just to work hard. I mean, I think there isn't any other alternative. Work hard, invest everything you can, and be first around what you do and where your passion and your heart is. That's an A. B, for women specifically, I think that if you encounter something that feels wrong here, then don't ignore it. Now, I don't think my suggestion would not be to flip the table every time, not at all. But if something feels wrong, then something potentially is wrong. So take a look at it, explore it, examine it, potentially consult with other individuals that have more experience, and then decide on what's the MO there. But don't just ignore it, because I think that from the individual level, if you continue ignoring it, you just start developing a pattern which is not good on the individual level, and specifically, of course, not for the professional course level.
And of course, ultimately, having gender equality within the fintech industry and more diverse perspectives will make all of these companies more successful, right? All these companies. So why aren't they doing it?
Why aren't they doing it? Why aren't they giving away the crown? Because it's a very nice chair to be sitting on. I think it's, again, it's a lot of patterns that are so consistent and so prominent among our society, and I think it's a change. I think we're in a very positive place, again, relatively to where we've been, obviously a few decades ago, but also I would say 5 years ago. I think that a lot of the phenomena and patterns that existed behind closed doors, specifically within big organizations all around the world, unfortunately, right, across tech, across legal firm, across finance, are starting to be more and more, spotted and addressed. And I think that on that aspect, it's good. And unfortunately, I'm sure every woman have at least one story in her drawer of something. And currently, I think that there's much less tolerance towards that. And I think that that's a blessing. And I think that, again, first, we need, as women, to continue working together to support each other. I think that the problem is not necessarily only with men. I always have. I think that women are not as accepting and as supporting to one another, unfortunately. And within this program, by the way, that I'm doing, my first sentence is always, you don't need to be mean to one another in order to, to show that you're the big boss. And I think that this is something that people all around, and specifically women, needs to be more aware of.
Yeah, I just sort of iterating what you're saying as we go through. I mean, actually, I think they are. I mean, I certainly see it so I was at Barclays for 15 years and then in 2 fintechs. I mean, I see that they are because they're listening to the customer. And so I can say on behalf of my company, they are hyper-focused on it. And they sort of almost over-communicate on this, like they're potentially over-indexed on it because it is such a hot topic. Not that they could be over-indexed, but so it's coming because we support SMEs, and a lot of those SMEs are women-led SMEs or generally represent the diverse culture in which we live in. So there are pockets of it, I think, and I think particularly on the startup scene. But then every now and then I read something like, oh, look at the VC funding for women-led startups compared to men's startups. And it's just dwarfed, right? And I guess more visibility for those types of investors. Like those investors need to make it a KPI of those to allocate funding. It is imperative that becomes one of the guiding principles for originating transactions, because otherwise they will never come to a forefront. If it's just a natural shakeup of all the companies in the room that are raising funding, chances are they're not going to have that sort of equilibrium rebalanced. So that would be one of the ways I would put it on them.
I think, companies are trying, and you see companies trying, that there are funds that will help women invest in companies, become entrepreneurs, startups. There aren't enough of them, and there aren't enough candidates to make those choices that's what they want to do. So I don't think it's that companies aren't working hard. I don't think it's that companies aren't trying. I think it's a systemic structural problem that takes time. And the challenge with time is that nowadays we're not used to waiting for things. We make a decision and we suddenly want the world to be fundamentally different. The world's different from when I grew up. I now have a PC on my desk. My first job, I didn't have a PC on my desk. I have a phone that does amazing things. But the world, it takes time to change, and everyone's different. We need to work on so many different layers to get the diversity for our customers, get the diversity for our colleagues that we need, and it will just take time. But people are doing that. There are programs we talked about. You see focus at schools, you see focus through universities, and so the things are happening. We just need to amplify, make more of it, but it will take time.
Right, do we have any questions from the audience? If you do, if you can put your hand up and we'll get a microphone out to you. Could we get a microphone out here, please?
You wanted to say something?
If you just keep your hand up, I'll come back to you in a second. Just while we're running the 100 metres across the hall here. Do you think we'll ever reach a stage where conversations like this are redundant? Where we're not having this conversation at events like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Odelia didn't answer that?
I want to believe so. Again, I think it's getting better. I think it's very dependent upon in which part of the world you're working on, because here, maybe it will be easier, but in other parts of the world, there's still a very, very long path to go. And unfortunately, the other parts of the world are not moving forward, they're moving the other way. So that leaves me with great concern overall.
Okay, well, that's a balanced view, I think, from the panel, which is good. If you can just please state your name and where you're from, please, and then if we can have your question.
Hi, my name is Beth Kemp, most recently with Duco, as a product manager building out an Emira solution for them. The thing that strikes me about this conversation is that I've heard this for 20 years. Yeah. Nothing's changed, and it's sad. Well, I think we've made progress. So I was in financial services at Bloomberg for 20 years, got transferred here to the UK, decided to pivot into FinTech, went back to school, educated myself, and now I'm there. But I'm really sad to come to this conference and hear the same thing that I heard 20 years ago. It's exactly the same. Yeah, financial services is a tough place. My first job was the Chicago Mercantile Exchange on the floor. So, like, I was the only girl out of like 5,000 people. But still, it's the same damn conversation. What are we essentially doing wrong in society? And you're right, it's not equal across the world. I lived in Brazil for 20 years. Believe me, it's a different game. And they're nowhere near as close as we are here in London. But I don't know the answer, but I'm just raising the point that I've heard this conversation for 20 years. I think, to Kamila's point, one of the things you can do to stay relevant and be important in the room is just to be continuously learning, always back in school. And because things are new, and you're right, things aren't defined, I think that might be one of the paths. I just finished a prompt engineering course at Oxford, for example, because not many people have that skill yet. So that makes me relevant in the room. So that's my sort of kryptonite. I try to always, be educated. But I don't know, we've got to put our heads together, girls, because this is just not cool.
Okay, thank you. I think that was more of a comment than a question, which is absolutely fair.
No,
Does anyone want to chip in there and give some feedback?
I mean, this is what Jenny and I were talking about before the session started, right? Like, we wanted to have a super optimistic conversation, and we were like, a lot of it is same old. Particularly like the point about relevancy. Like, I want to before I go to a meeting, I want to make sure like my level of knowledge is like rock solid, because I might not get a second chance, and I validate myself by being there. But then, I think about it, it's like, no, I'm enough. Like, I don't need to be the expert just to sit at the table. So part of it is my MO, which is changing, hopefully in time. But this is, you've hit the nail on the head on what Jenny and I were discussing right before.
I think we had one more question as well. We'll make this final one. Again, if you can just state your name and where you're from, please.
Thank you. My name is Carolina, and I am from Mexico. I was working in BlackRock for 2 years as a product strategist, and I'm now here continuing my studies. And I just wanted to, on the topic of development, see if you have any key strategies and concrete actions that companies can do to develop talent. As we know, there are many women that are starting off their careers, but once they hit that VP or that director position, it gets a bit tougher to continue developing. And also, if I can ask a second one, maybe if you have an example of good male allyship, as I think people need also a role model on how to advocate for women. So that would be it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody?
So I'll take the second half. I'll take good male allyship.
Yeah.
Throughout my career, I've been extraordinarily lucky, and I think someone else said that, I've had great mentors and male allies. Started early in my career because I suspected I was a daughter figure and they had daughters and they didn't want their daughter not to have opportunities. And so, you know, the role of male allies has actually changed in the way that they behave and they treat people. Now it's about sponsorship. It's about, you know, I have great mentors who will sponsor me into roles who, you know, when I get a call from a headhunter, you know, I've got a good sense of where it's come from because they're the ones that are helping me do the best I can do and are confident that I'm the right person. And so, you know, that's some really great examples of male allyship. And you don't have to be female for someone to promote you, but that's a great example of where, you know, men I've worked for have actively worked to help me move forward on my career.
Do you want to take the development?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for both of your questions. I think they're, and unfortunately I have to agree. I think that in terms of a plan or a strategy, I didn't have a mentor, right? I always have still have, I hope, an internal feeling of the direction that I need to go. And I just ran, you know, fiercely. And sometimes I say I wish in my personal life I would have run the way I do on my professional one. So my advice to you would be, honestly, just listen to where your heart is and don't be scared because, you know, worst case we fall, worst case, you know, we always have a place to come back to. Everything is going to be all right. I think that finding mentors and people you trust is very important. Unfortunately, I haven't found at the beginning of my career any, but mentors can also be your parents. It can also be, you know, an old person that you know, people that are wise, that have seen a thing or two in their life and that you trust, that really wants what's best for you. These are the people I would encourage you to consult, and I think it's very important to consult with people. The wiser, the older, experience is a blessing, is a gift, and I think it's the most valuable thing that one has. So that would be my 2 cents.
I would say, because I was reticent to leave a company for a really long time. I mean, 15 years is a long time to be in one. I think it's because I felt so comfortable and people knew who I was and that I wouldn't have to like prove myself. Like, I don't have to prove to anyone that I'm smart or articulate. Like, I just couldn't face it. If I'm really honest with myself, I stayed because of that. I would say that leaving companies and moving to a new environment is incredibly enriching. I know that sounds really stupid to say, but I think about the skill sets, right, like that I would like to pick up is I'll work in a small company, then I'll work abroad, then I'll work in a super specialist department, so I become the specialist on a particular domain. And then I think I could have accelerated my career beyond what it is today by doing that and by being just a little bit braver. So I don't know that you need to, and then people will say, oh, but you don't want to move around because, you know, 2 years in one company, people will start asking you why you're moving to the next, what's wrong with you, blah, blah, blah. Like, none of that is true, right? People are super mobile now, and so I would say that you can take that opportunity. It's probably very remunerative also, if you think about salary acceleration. So that would be my piece of advice, although I'm not sure I'm entitled to give anyone advice about anything, really.
Okay, well, I think that was a more positive note to end on, wasn't it, really, looking more to the future. Thank you for both of your questions, really appreciate it. Please join me in thanking our panel, Jenny, Kamila, Odelia. Thank you.
Thank you.